Hey, what's up guys, Gave Productions here. Today I'm going back to reviewing the first type of product I've ever reviewed on my channel, and that is a keyboard. So in front of me here I have the Keychron K5 version 5. Let's get into the unboxing. So as we peel off the plastic and open up the box, we are first greeted by some foam. I know some of you here probably expected to see the keyboard right on top, but this foam is actually quite important because it does protect the keyboard underneath the foam. So lifting the foam out of the way, you get the keyboard right underneath, and this is a pretty long keyboard as it is a full-size keyboard with a number pad, meaning there is 104 keys. Lifting the keyboard up to the top for now, we can see the rest of the accessories that you do get in the box. So you do get a USB-C to USB-A cable for charging or connecting directly to your device, which is nice. You also do get the rest of the standard accessories that you do find in a Keychron box, such as your additional keys for Windows, as the Mac keys are the ones that are pre-installed. You also get your keycap remover and your switch remover, which I must mention only comes with the hot-swappable keyboards. I'll get into more about that later. Other than that, you do get your standard paperwork as well as the chart, which tells you which keys to switch out on your keyboard if you're planning to use this keyboard with Windows or Mac OS. So the back of this chart is pretty useful. It tells you some good information such as how to connect the keyboard via Bluetooth or via cable, how to change the lighting of the keyboard, how to disable auto sleep mode, which I did leave out on my previous review of the K8, and how to activate the voice assistant and switch out between function and multimedia keys. The front, like I mentioned, does tell you which switches to switch out depending on whether you're using Mac OS or Windows. So yeah, if there is one piece of paperwork that you wouldn't want to throw away, it is definitely this card right here. So as I mentioned, this is the Keychron K5 version 5. This is basically Keychron's full-size slim keyboard. The exact type of K5 I have here is a RGB aluminum frame using low-profile Keychron optical banana switches, which are hot swappable. I'll talk more about why I chose these specific switches in a moment when I do talk about the typing experience, but first let's talk about some other features of this keyboard. So this keyboard does have RGB because I chose to get the RGB one. It has 18 different RGB lights you can choose from, with one of them being white, so that's nice if you are maybe using this as an office keyboard and you don't want to look like a gamer. Although I'd want to mention that the white light on the RGB keyboard is essentially just a mix of all the RGB LEDs shining together, and I did notice that the white mode on this keyboard does have more of a green tint to it than my K8. My K8 does look a bit more neutral or a bit more bluish than this K5 over here, which has a very strong green undertone for some reason. My guess is because of how the LED lights are lighting up. Maybe one of them isn't lighting up enough, but this is evident throughout the whole keyboard. I also do notice that if you do press down the key, the white does get a bit stronger, which is standard. But not just that, the color of the white actually also shifts to be a bit more accurate. It becomes a bit more warmer, less green when you do press a key down. So that is pretty interesting. Like I said, I think it might be the arrangement of the LEDs or the way that the LEDs are lighting up underneath the switches. So yeah, do take note of that. Also, because this isn't a white keyboard but rather an RGB one, when you do look at the keyboard from an angle, no matter what light mode you're on, or as long as you're using any lights on this keyboard, even the white light, you will still see a lot of color shining out from the side of the keys, as the LEDs are RGB and not just white. So that is one thing to take note of. From an angle, even if you're using the white light, you will see the switches being pretty colorful because the white is just a mix of the RGB LEDs lighting up. So yeah. Of course, if you really want to, you can just turn off the lights entirely on this keyboard, which the person that this keyboard belongs to may actually do because they do work in an office, and so the RGB lights shining through the side of the switches may draw a little bit too much attention. Essentially, I chose the RGB option as if I ever wanted to sell or give away this keyboard to anyone in the future, this keyboard is technically of higher value and in a way, just more complete. Also, unlike other Keychron keyboards where sometimes you do get the option between just the standard keyboard or one with where they add aluminum rails, both the white and RGB versions of this K5 is made out of mostly aluminum. Well, at least the chassis of this keyboard is mostly aluminum. The only non-aluminum part of this keyboard are the left and side plastic rails over here, but the rest of the keyboard from the top, the bottom, and the front and back are also made of aluminium, so that's nice. Basically, this keyboard does feel very premium, at least more so than even my K8, which just uses aluminium rails. And the whole keyboard is very sturdy. There is no way you're bending this unless you purposefully use all your strength to try and bend this keyboard. So no worries about keyboard flex here at all. Next, let's talk about the buttons and USB layout of this keyboard. So by buttons, I mean like the toggle switches. Unlike my K8, the on and off switch, as well as the Mac and Windows toggle switch, are at the top of the keyboard now instead of the left side of the keyboard like my K8. This is a welcome change in terms of aesthetic, but I wouldn't have mind if they continued to put it off to the side on the left or the right. The USB-C port has also been moved from the left side of the keyboard with the switches to the top of the keyboard center over here, and this one is definitely good. This is a welcome change, no question here. I never really liked the port being off to the left of the keyboard, as if your computer was to the right side of your keyboard, or even just to the front, having the USB cable kind of like just go across the entire table and then bend over to the left, that was a bit ugly in my opinion. So having it a bit more symmetrical in the center at the top is definitely a welcome change, and I have no complaints there at all. And since I have mentioned about the toggle switches, I'll just mention that this keyboard, as you probably already know by now, can connect to both macOS and Windows, as well as iOS and Android devices as well, like most Bluetooth keyboards can. All you have to do is just toggle the switch in order to change the modes, which are over here. So Mac OS and iOS are together, and Windows and Android are the other switch. So just toggle off the switch and you should be good to go. This keyboard also does use Bluetooth 5.1, which is nice, but not that it really matters too much in terms of which Bluetooth version it uses. As per many other Keychron wireless keyboards, you do have 3 Bluetooth profiles that you can change by pressing the function key and either 1, 2, or 3. As you can see over here, there are 3 Bluetooth icons on 1, 2, and 3. So you do have 3 profiles to connect this keyboard. Overall, the connectivity is pretty solid. With my M1 Mac Mini, this keyboard does reconnect from sleep fairly quickly most of the time, and the keyboard does work well with other devices I have tested, such as my Razer Blade 14 and my Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra. In terms of battery life, I haven't really had the chance to test the endurance of this keyboard, as I will have to return this keyboard to its rightful owner very soon, but it does have a 2000 mAh battery, which is fairly small, but that's to be expected of a low profile thin keyboard like this one. As you can see how thin it is, so 2000 milliamps is pretty decent for such a thin and low profile keyboard. Keychron does state on their website that this keyboard can last up to 190 or 110 hours with Bluetooth. I'm not sure why there's 2 and they don't specify any differences between the 190 or 110 hours, so I'm not sure which you should look at and listen to. My guess is maybe one is for macOS and the others is in the Windows mode. I really have no idea. If you're using a white backlight variant with the white backlight on, then this keyboard is expected to last about 36 hours. If you do have the RGB variant like mine over here, then it is expected to last about 38 hours if you do have the RGB lights on. Now let's finally move on to the typing experience of this keyboard. And disclaimer, this will vary according to the type of switches that you do choose to get. As mentioned, I am using the low profile Keychron optical banana switches. So first I want to explain why I chose these switches specifically. So why Keychron optical over Gateron mechanical? Honestly, I would choose Gateron mechanical if they had hot swappability. So for me, hot swappability is an important feature, as if a switch just randomly decides to die, I would have no problem just swapping in a new switch. Now to be clear, I am not sure how easy it is to replace the Gateron mechanical switches, but from what I heard, they are soldered, which means that you do have to desolder them and resolder a new switch. So in my case, I just wanted ease of mind and being able to swap out a switch quickly and easily if the situation arises. Also, I guess you do have the benefit of, let's say I didn't like these banana switches, I can just get a set of brown switches and swap out the banana switches with brown switches, although it would take a bit of time because you gotta swap out each one individually, but yeah, that is pretty easy, no doubt. However, I must mention that I do have a bit of trust issues with Keychron deciding on how long they will continue to produce Keychron optical switches, as at least for the full travel Keychron optical switches and my K8 up here, some, including myself, are starting to believe that Keychron may have actually stopped production of those switches. I've waited, more than a few months to purchase a set of full travel brown optical switches from Keychron, but they have been unavailable for months now, so I'm not, that's not a really good sign, and Keychron are the only people who make Keychron optical switches, and if you buy a Keychron optical switch keyboard, hot-swappable, your keyboard is only really compatible with Keychron switches. From what I heard, even Gateron optical switches are not compatible with Keychron keyboards, so that is definitely something to take note of. As of now, on their website though, it does seem that Keychron is continuing to sell low-profile Keychron optical switches, so I'm not sure how long they will continue to support that, but they still sell them for now. My recommendation, although this does cost you more money and you do have to give Keychron a bit more money as well, is to get a set of extra switches as well. It isn't that expensive. I think it's about $19. I don't know. I might be wrong. Let me check real quick. Yeah, so a set of 87 low-profile Keychron optical switches are $19 US. Low-profile Gateron mechanical switches are $15. So they do sell, low-profile Gateron mechanical switches, but I'm still not sure whether they are hot swappable or they're soldered. But yeah, so $19 for low-profile Keychron 87 switches and $15 for 35 Gateron mechanical switches. So it's not that expensive, but I know you still have to spend extra money, but if you can, just go ahead and buy them to have some ease of mind. Also, another recommendation from me is that if you are getting a Keychron keyboard and have the option of getting a Gateron mechanical hot swappable or Gateron optical hot swappable, then go for those options instead of Keychron's optical switches. If I'm not wrong, the new K8, for example, does use Gateron optical hot swappable instead of Keychron optical, so yeah, do choose those instead. Now, as to why I chose to go with banana switches, that was down to who this keyboard was for. The person that owns this keyboard made it clear to me that they were going to use this in an office that was pretty open and cubicle style, meaning that you would have your own cubicle and that was quite open, at least from the behind, and people would pretty much be able to hear you typing no problem. And because of that, blue switches were immediately eliminated. There was no way I was getting blue switches because those things, they sound like a gunshot every time you press a key in an office. So my next candidate were brown switches, but the person that was getting this keyboard also told me that they didn't like to have, to press the keys too deep or in order to get actuation, or didn't like the mushy feeling that you get with those like cheap membrane style keyboards. So in order to eliminate most of their worries, I decided to get banana switches, which are also only available as Keychron optical and not Gateron mechanical, by the way, so that's also one reason why I had no choice but to go with Keychron optical. Now, I have never used banana switches before, but from Keychron's description and other people's description on Reddit, they are essentially supposed to feel similar to brown switches, but with an early bump or tactile bump, or basically the click should start near the top of the switch. So in my testing, although I don't have low profile brown switches to compare to, what everyone has said is kind of true. The keys basically feel very stiff before you even press them, unlike my full travel K8 over here, where you can kind of press the key down a bit before you start to feel the stiffness, which is where the start of the clicky action does begin. On the K5 with these banana switches, it is not there at all. You pretty much already start at the clickiness or the the stiffness of the switch. So do correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my guess of like what banana and mint switches do, is that they basically eliminate the softness that you feel before you actually hit the start of the clickiness or actuation. Now that I've explained why I went with the switches I chose to go with, let's talk about my typing experience. So overall, because this is a low profile keyboard with low profile switches, it did take me a few hours to get used to this keyboard, at least compared to my K8. The first thing I already felt, which is a bad thing by the way, is fatigued wrists, and I attribute that to the keyboard's lack of adjustable feet. As you can see, this keyboard has no adjustable feet at all and is pretty much locked at this specific angle that you buy this keyboard at. Although you could also just get something to put underneath the keyboard, that doesn't hide the fact that it was a dumb move on Keychron's part not to include adjustable feet. But I must admit that after a few hours of use, I did start to get more used to typing on this keyboard without getting my wrists fatigued. but it's still nowhere near as comfortable as typing on my K8 with a palm rest. That is also another possible recommendation, which is to basically get a thin palm rest to use with this keyboard if you can. As for the feel of the banana switches, I gotta say that I do actually really like them. Again, it did take a while to get used to them, but they do feel really good, especially with that early bump. So they are fairly quiet and definitely usable in an office environment. I think that these, along with brown switches, are pretty much the best compromise you can get instead of getting blue switches, which in an office, as I've mentioned, sounds like you're shooting an MG42, as you type a lot. Overall, my typing experience with this is quite mixed. While I do like the feeling of the switches and also the size and shape of the keycaps, I didn't really like the overall height and shape of the keyboard. It was too low at the top and a little too high at the bottom. Your mileage will vary, of course, according to what additional accessories you get for this keyboard and what kind of switches you choose to get as well. So now, is this keyboard worth it? Well, this exact spec over here cost the person who bought this keyboard $99 US. With shipping to Singapore, that is an additional $13 US. So in total, this keyboard costs about $112 US, or around 154 Singapore dollars, depending on the exchange rate. In my opinion, if you're just a casual gamer, looking for a mechanical keyboard, a low profile one specifically, and you don't care a lot about customizability in terms of like being able to program this keyboard like using QMK, then yeah, this is actually a pretty worth keyboard at only 154 Singapore dollars. At least compared to those many other more expensive options, usually above 200 Singapore dollars, that you find at Challenger or Quartz, such as Logitech mechanical keyboards or even Razer mechanical keyboards. And even the Logitech MX series of keyboards, which aren't mechanical, are, if I'm not wrong, definitely more expensive than these. So yeah, this keyboard at 154 Singapore dollars, and that's inclusive of shipping, is quite worth in my opinion. If you're also a casual typist or an office worker looking for a new mechanical keyboard but don't want to look like a gamer, then you're in luck, because the white backlight version of this keyboard is also $10 US less. And the aesthetic of this keyboard in general doesn't give off a very gamer feeling, which is very nice. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. This video does bring back quite a bit of nostalgia, even though I haven't had this channel for very long yet, but it does kind of feel like I'm revisiting an old friend in a way. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you like this video, do give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, as it really helps this channel out. Share this video if you found it useful. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.